So welcome back. We're just going to have a look at the bench here, look at some tools, the sorts of things I use and some of the materials that I use when I'm making bases and what I use for sculpting and stuff as well. So let's have a look. Alright, what we've got here is a box of random stuff, and I thought I'd just go through some of the basic things that it amazes me that some people don't use. Decent steel ruler. Can't go without a decent steel ruler. You want to make a straight line, can't use a plastic ruler, and if you're not measuring things, you're a bit of an idiot. Strainer. Crazy, I know. When using flock and things like that, even using sand, straining it's going to give you a much better result than you're going to get just using your fingertips. Pens, pencils, that sort of thing. Sharpies, awesome, cheap. Get them in a 4-pack for a few bucks. Good tip on a Sharpie. Great for marking out lines, things like that. Putting dots down when you're pinning models, even that sort of thing. Jeweler's saw or a hobby saw. Fantastic thing to have, particularly if you're working with metal models or thick plastic stuff. All sorts of wire. I've got a couple of different gauges of wire. Let me just grab another one from over here. So I've got some thicker wire again. $2 from, random Chinese $2 shop. If you're not going to buy guitar strings or whatever for doing sort of coiled things, this is great for wrapping around your other wire to make coils on your own. Thread for holding models together. I know a lot of people use rubber bands, clips, that sort of thing. I like using string on models because you can wrap it around and get better angles to hold the bits you actually want to hold. Like needles, again, a couple of bucks. You can sculpt with them, you can poke things. When your glue dries up, you can open it up again. Needles, fantastic. Got to have all sorts of tape. An eraser, which you can use for all sorts of stuff. And standard box paper clips. I use paper clips for pinning because, well, they're ridiculously cheap. Easy to cut and quite strong metal comparatively. Alright, let's get this box out of the way. Talk a bit more specifics. There's a bit of product placement in that shot if you know what you're looking for. Okay, so this is my workbench here. It's actually fairly neat at the moment because I cleaned it up yesterday. There's some Infinity and Alchemy stuff that I'm working on. And just to give you an example of some of the sorts of things we're going to talk about, here's some bases for Infinity that I'm making at the moment. These are about halfway through. Other tools. Everyone should have this sort of stuff. Pin vise for assembling your models, pinning, all that sort of stuff. There's all sorts of little jeweler's screwdrivers and stuff. Again, stuff like this can be great for sculpting with or just prying stuff apart. Good pair of scissors, particularly when you're doing terrain. Not so important for doing models with. But if you're converting with plastic card or anything, particularly when you're doing bases, you can see a lot of these have little bits of plastic card, plastic rod, whatever. Quick snip with the scissors is good, particularly if you're looking for that rough edge look. Scalpel. Can't go without a scalpel. You can trim models down with it. I don't trim off the sprue with it, I use clippers, which we'll get to in a second. But I much prefer a scalpel for most things than a retractable modelling knife. They're just sharper, you get a better edge with them. And because they go down to a small point, they're much better for just trimming small edges if you've got little curves and stuff. I actually use this a hell of a lot in my sculpting as well. Good flat edge on the back of the blade there, and just prying things up with a scalpel again because it's so thin you can get some good effects with it. I at one stage bought this little set of tools, again from just dodgy Chinese $2 shop. There's a few more of them lying around. Things with pokey bits on the end. Good for random sculpting. You can use that back of that curve there. Some of them I ground down with a Dremel just to get some different shapes. Also, having good pointy things for when you're pinning. So you do a pilot hole. These can be much better than a retractable knife. They're a lot stronger, a lot sturdier. I generally just use a retractable knife, but recently I've been getting back more into using just a standard Stanley. I just find the blades, the strength means, particularly if you're making terrain, you want to cut through big things like some of these precast plastic components. Good pair of clippers. I was actually having a discussion with a gentleman in a store the other day. We were talking about clippers. Best thing you can buy if you don't have a pair of clippers, and particularly if you're doing Games Workshop stuff where you're trimming off sprue, you're stupid. You're just plain out stupid. You need a pair of clippers. Much better than a pair of scissors. You won't hurt yourself trimming stuff off sprue like you can slash yourself with a hobby knife. You get a much cleaner cut with a good pair of side clippers. Various files. Again, some random $2 shop. Get just a cheap set of files. They're not really good for doing detail work with because a cheap file is a cheap file and you get what you pay for, but for doing bulk stuff, particularly terrain making and just quickly getting the edges off things, they work fine. Good pair of pliers, big file. Got to have at least one big file so you can flatten things off. Often, particularly when we get into base making, things just won't be flat and you need to do a large area, and a small file is going to annoy you. Glue, of course, plastic glue. For large stuff, or for metal stuff, I like the Zapper Gap. I know some people consider it glue snobbery, but Zapper Gap, definitely the way to go. Where his lid's gone, that one's a bit old. Now, I also have a Dremel, which, to be honest, if you don't have a Dremel, you probably don't need one. They are great if you're making a lot of terrain, and if you are going to get into terrain making, I heartily recommend getting a Dremel. If you're just making models, particularly if you're newer to the hobby, or you're doing all plastics, you do not need a Dremel. Particularly not one of these corded, powerful Dremels. The smaller hobby ones are okay. Because with plastics, particularly something like this, you pretty much just melt anything you touch with it. If you're doing metals, particularly like if you're doing old metals like I did with Space Wars, I'm doing a lot of conversions from second-hand metal figures, or if you're doing some of the larger or character stuff, trying to do head swaps and stuff, a Dremel is pretty invaluable because you can just route out the head, smooth things off, polish things up way easier than you can do it by hand. Again, if you're just doing standard GW plastics, Dremel's becoming less and less useful. If you do have a Dremel or something like that, good stack of tools, attachments for it, carving things, wheels, knives, all that sort of garbage. Again, just to diss Dremel a little bit more, don't buy Dremel brand stuff. It is good, but horribly, horribly expensive. So that entire kit there cost me about $40, $45, I think, at Bunnings. Great quality tools, but equivalent thing from Dremel's about $200. And we have, as well as all these various things we've just been talking about, sculpting tools. So when we get into sculpting and puttying, this is a Gale Force 9 set of tools, which I actually haven't used yet. I only bought them the other day. But I did get a couple of these off Ben Morsler just recently, just a couple of individual sculpting tools. This Gale Force 9 set actually comes with 2 spare slots, and conveniently I bought two tools off Ben. These are both really cool. I've used both of these a bit now. The little ones with the burnishing balls, you think, what do I need little burnishing balls for? But they're fantastic, particularly when we start getting into doing nitty kinds of things. Let's see if I can find... it must be hidden under here somewhere. Oh, here we go. This is a really trashy one. So that's just using the burnishing ball there, just poking it into holes. There's a really good one around here somewhere. These are just sort of playing around with spare bits of green stuff that I had when I was doing some modelling work the other day, and sort of knowing that this project was coming up. Every time I've got just a little bit of spare crap lying around, I just do something nitty with it. Here's the good one. That's pretty much just using burnishing ball and a knife and just sort of gooing it around a bit, going over multiple times, sort of stretching things together. And that's, 30 seconds of work. Just got to leave it to dry. And that could easily be an adrenal gland or some sort of detailing on a creature. It's one of the reasons I'd like to do the Space Hulk base list, because I get to do some of this sort of stuff and I'm kind of keen.